What's going on? I'm going to show you guys how I get a perfect sear on a steak. Went to the supermarket and I bought some typical steaks that you would have, as to not have any products that most people wouldn't have access to. So the few main things that we need to focus on are having a dry surface of the steak so it doesn't steam, and no water has to evaporate first before it starts caramelizing. We need to make sure there's enough fat on the steak, so that, because what the fat does is the fat evenly distributes heat across the steak. Another big reason why restaurants get much better sears on their steaks is because they have fattier, higher quality meat. Another thing is the heat has to be perfect and evenly distributed. A lot of people cook their steaks too hot or too low. And the final thing would be, that's not as relevant, is the weight of the steak. So by weight of the steak, I mean, these steaks right here are, the left one's slightly thicker than the one on the right. But if these steaks were together like this, like the weight from the top of this steak is obviously weighing this down, that would give more surface area. But most people do not have access to 2 or 3 inch thick steaks, so that's why we're using the thinner steaks, and we could always just press them down a little bit to get more surface area with the grill. Another thing I did was I clarified some raw butter real quick. Look at this, it's nice, real nice, almost orange color. And what I could do with this clarified butter is I could brush it on the steak if it's not caramelizing evenly, or use it on the leaner ones. As you can see with my grill here, these flames are super high. This grill is easily at least, I don't know. Right now on these grates, it's probably at least 600 degrees, I would assume. Probably even hotter. It could be up to 700-800 degrees right now. So by putting some wood and some charcoal in my gas grill, which I showed you guys in another video, I have a very high flame. Right, and it shouldn't take us more than 2 minutes to get a nice crust on the steak. So first, I'm going to just brush a little bit of clarified butter on one side, and I'm going to put this steak near the flame. I don't want it directly over the flame, otherwise it will burn. I want it near the flame. So a little bit of clarified butter on this one. Near the flame, not directly over the flame. And then same with the last steak. A little bit of clarified butter near the flame. Most people like to flip their steaks every minute or two, but even just after a few seconds on the grill, because of the heat, we already have some very nice grill marks on that side of the steak. And I'm just going to keep basting these with the clarified butter. And I'm going to flip them every like 20 or 30 seconds just to make sure I get even heat distribution and I'm not burning the steak at all. So again, flip the steaks, a little more clarified butter on top. And you only need to do the clarified butter until the steak starts rendering its own fat, and then you don't really need to brush it anymore. So I think we've only been on the grill for about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and this steak, that was in a really good spot. Most people don't even get a crust this good on the steak, but I'm going for something really nice in this video, so we're going to try to get total browning on the whole steak. So flip it again, flip this one again. I'll move this one a bit closer to the heat because it's not really browning up there. A little more clarified butter on each one. Okay. More clarified butter. This one just got a little too burned, so we shouldn't have put it over the really hot part of the grill, but What are you gonna do? Let's see how. So these are starting to look pretty good. What are we? We're about 3 minutes in now, I think, grilling these. 3 minutes in, and a lot of times, you know, if I wasn't filming, I'd probably stop grilling right now. I would think this is good. A little more clarified butter on top. And the reason I'm using clarified butter is, I mean, it does have a slightly lower smoke point, but it's mainly because I'm allergic to the milk protein, so I get less of a reaction to the clarified butter than regular butter. So I'm gonna take this steak off because it's thinner. These two are just about done. And now, so I'm gonna take those off, and now we're gonna try some steaks without the clarified butter that are a bit leaner, just to. But so the one thing is, since this grill is so hot, and since there was already some rendered fat on the grates, I don't think we need to brush these ones with clarified butter, but we'll see if there's much of a difference. You know, either way, it will probably end up adding flavor. So if you see the browning on these, you know, it's relatively nice and even all across the steak. The only way we could have gotten a better crust than this is if we dried the steak out, like on a rack in the fridge beforehand, or if we had a much heavier, thicker steak, or we pressed down a bit more. But we don't want to. But we would have overcooked the steak if we did that. So these steaks that we're not brushing with clarified butter, you can see instead of browning all over, they're getting more grill marks just where the heat is distributed on the flanks of the grill. So that brushing that clarified butter definitely helps the heat distribution. I think that was like 40 seconds on each side, and we got very dark grill marks already. But as you can see, where there's no metal on the grill, we're not getting caramelization. Whereas when we brush the clarified butter on, we got a lot of caramelization. So let me cross-hatch these. So without the clarified butter, it seems like we need to reposition the steaks on the flush parts of the grill in order to brown them properly. So, you know, is it imperative to brush your steaks with clarified butter? No, but it makes it a little bit easier, and it probably adds a bit more flavor too. See, doing it this way, we have crosshatch. Doing it the other way, we had perfectly even browning, and it also reduces the cook time greatly. So, you know, you might end up overcooking a steak trying to get brown marks without having adequate fat on it. Use a little flavor on the grill. So these steaks, I gotta take off now, because I'm gonna overcook them. But, you know, they browned a little more slowly and not as evenly without the butter on them. Still very close though. So again guys, the purpose of this video was to show you how to get a perfect crust with reasonable equipment and time you know, not having to dry out your steak in the fridge overnight, not having to buy a 2-inch thick ribeye. And there were very apparent differences even if when I removed one technique, let alone if I had put a wet steak on the grill or used a lower heat. So, you know, even in the poor lighting in my kitchen, there is like a noticeable color difference between, like, these steaks are the steaks that I grilled with clarified butter, and these are the steaks I grilled without clarified butter. And the ones on top have more even browning, and they're slightly darker. So we're gonna take just one of each steak, and we're just gonna cut into it, show you guys the temperature. I mean, if I did it how I wanted to, it should be raw. So the first steak is raw on the inside, cooked blue, just a nice brown crust on the outside. And the second steak, same thing, cooked blue, but just a nice brown crust on the outside. Not as evenly browny because we didn't brush it in butter, but let's just take out the thinner steak and see how they did. Thinner steak still blue, but closer to rare than blue. But this is a great technique that you can use to get a crust on any steak. When you're pan frying, I might do a separate video on that. Pan frying a steak and getting a nice crust is incredibly difficult to do without the proper pan and the proper stove, and it's much more difficult than, at least for me, than doing this. It makes much more of a mess in the kitchen and various other things. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you want to see any other videos, specific topics, whatever it may be. One final thing I will touch on is using that wood and that charcoal to grill these steaks gives a whole nother dimension of flavor than using pan sear, whatever it may be. This is by far the tastiest way to grill a steak.